Should be good to go.
Okay. Yay. Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining. Thank you all for being here and for caring about blood sugar and why and how to manage it and excuse me, that's my second time doing this. You will learn in this session some practical solutions on how to manage blood sugar, what blood sugar is, what diabetes is, what type 2 diabetes is. And if you don't know me, my name is Abby Chan. I'm a registered dietitian, and I am the co-owner of EVOLVE Flagstaff. And you can actually see me if you want more personalized nutrition recommendations. You can see me for 6 sessions every year for free. So this will be a great overview, and then feel free to also ask any questions at the end.
No, wait, give me just a second to get, okay, now try.
Yeah, okay. So we're going to talk about, first and foremost, what is diabetes? What influences our blood sugar? What are the risks of high blood sugar? And the 5 keys to management of healthy blood sugar levels. So I want to be very clear that first and foremost, consistency is always going to be so much better than intensity. So consistency is not very exciting for humans. Intensity is really exciting. Like when we get something new, we're so excited about it. If we start a new exercise plan, it's really exciting. If we do a really intense diet, we do it for a few weeks and then we stop. So I want to encourage you that, yes, I know intensity is really exciting. It's really fun for our brain, but it's really going to be the long, slow, tiny steps that we can start to layer into your day that are going to actually have the most impact on your overall health. Okay, so definition of terms. First and foremost, blood glucose is the body's main source of energy. So glucose is sugar, sugar is glucose. All of these things equal energy. So it's the body's main source of energy, especially for the brain and the muscles. We all probably know that familiar feeling of what it feels like to have low blood sugar. Our brain kind of slows down, we get a little agitated, maybe get a little shaky, maybe we get tired. We know what that feeling is, maybe get a little dizzy. And so those can be some signs that your blood sugar is low. Another term that you will need to know is insulin. Insulin is the hormone that helps cells absorb glucose out of the bloodstream and into the cells to where they need to go. This happens all throughout the body. And with diabetes, what will happen is either the body doesn't make enough insulin or the insulin's not as effective as we want it to be to get that same job done. So this will eventually lead to elevated blood sugar levels, blood glucose levels. And when we have that mismatch of we may be making this hormone, but it's not doing the job, that's what can lead to what we'll talk about, which is a little bit more of type 2 diabetes. Prediabetes is a term that you may have heard. This is a state where blood sugar levels are higher than normal, but not high enough to be classified as diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune condition where the immune system starts to attack the pancreas and insulin-producing cells. And this can develop at any age. Oftentimes it can develop a little bit younger, but sometimes weird things happen. Human bodies are wild. Then we have type 2 diabetes. So this is typically what we think of when we think about diabetes. This is a condition where the body either doesn't respond to the insulin that is being produced, so insulin resistance, or the pancreas is just not producing enough. This is linked to genetics, stress, nutrition, sleep, and movement. I use the term movement as opposed to just exercise, or sometimes they use them interchangeably. And part of the reason why is because exercise automatically kind of just makes you feel like you don't want to do it. Feels like another thing you have to do on top of the million things you have to do in your day. And we often think of it in this very narrow window where it's, okay, if I have to exercise, I have to be this long, I have to do this, I have to wear this, I have to get a really expensive gym membership, when that's not inherently true. We can move in all different ways and shapes through our lives, and you can dance in your kitchen, you can go with your kids, you can go walk outside, you can garden, you can do so many different things that will still impact your blood sugar positively. And the management of type 2 diabetes will include obviously lifestyle changes and sometimes medication. Okay, so this is important. This is called the social determinants of health. So our genetics and our environment are deeply going to impact our health outcomes. And so the social determinants of health are basically the conditions that we live and grow and thrive in. And these are highly linked to the rate or possibility of us developing a chronic disease later down the line. So this is going to include our access to food, our agriculture systems. It's going to include our education status, high school degree, college degree, advanced degree, something like that. That's all part of your social determinant of health. Same thing as your work environment, your work culture, even schedule of work, if you end up working night shifts or things like that. Employment status, whether you're employed or not employed, is going to impact your health. Whether you have access to safe and clean water and air is going to impact your health, and surprisingly, blood sugars. And your access to healthcare and even safe housing. All of these are going to impact your body's ability to respond and thrive in a variety of conditions. From the CDC, the social determinants of health have a greater influence on health, greater influence than our genetics on, greater influence on our health than genetics or our access to healthcare services. So the genetic aspect of it, I have a family history of type 2 diabetes. My grandparents have it. My dad's fine at the time. But one thing that we need to look at is we need to know our family history. We need to know what could be coming down the line and know that, yes, our genes can be turned on or off by the conditions that we live and grow in. There's some other aspects that are also going to impact it too. So yes, our genetics will impact it. Just because your family has type 2 diabetes does not mean that you will. There's a lot of things that we can do to prevent that. But some of the things that will impact it are going to be environmental factors. So we have stress, trauma, historical trauma, discrimination, health and systemic inequities, and I remember even, I didn't mention this in my first presentation, but I remember even I was in my master's program and I was in a class of metabolic disorders. So diabetes is included in a metabolic disorder. And there was just a line that said, basically, all summarized words like black and brown individuals have a higher rate of type 2 diabetes, heart disease, and all these things, period. Without really recognizing why the case of that is, and it's because of our social determinants of health. Because generations ago our families may not have access to safe housing, there could have been trauma, discrimination, all these other things that impacted their genetics, which have then had an impact on our current genetics. That doesn't mean that there's nothing you can do about it, so don't feel totally disheartened by that. So going into this, blood sugar levels. So we have our hemoglobin A1C. This is going to be a 2 to 3 month average of where our blood sugar has been. So hemoglobin is a protein that is found in our red blood cells that go all around our body, and they carry oxygen. And so when our blood sugar levels are higher, there's going to be more sugar that is bound to those red blood cells, which means we're going to get a higher percentage in this hemoglobin A1C. So a normal would be below 5.6. It says 5.7 on here, but I made a typo because I'm human, so I'm sorry. I will correct that before we send you on the slide deck. So normal is below 5.6. Once we cross over the threshold of 5.7 to 6.4, that's when we're going into the pre-diabetes range. And that does not mean if you are pre-diabetic that you are predispositioned and you are just going to end up with type 2 diabetes. That is not the case. It's just like hey, let's pay attention to this and let's look out for what could be coming next. Then we have diabetes. So if your A1C is 6.5 or higher, that means we're looking at type 2 diabetes, maybe type 1, depending on what's going on, but likely type 2, especially if it's something that's like slowly starting to develop. And that's when we need to really, really start looking at possible medication intervention, nutrition, physical activity, and especially in this pre-diabetes place, this watch out place. This is when we can really start making those lifestyle shifts and changes so that we don't have to end up on any sort of medication, because when we have diabetes, it is typically going to be medication for life. Other factors that may affect your A1C, one is anemia. So anemia is where you don't have enough hemoglobin. There's a variety of reasons why this could happen, but basically you don't have enough oxygenation in your red blood cells, which is going to increase your A1C. So I've had people before where their A1C is elevated, not in the diabetes range, but they also have anemia. Once we treat that, then things can kind of come back into a more normal space. Chronic kidney disease, blood transfusion, alcohol, and also hydration will impact your blood sugar levels. So when we start to think about blood glucose, this is the immediate. So think of A1C as a longer term, think of blood glucose as this is immediate, what's happening right now. So if I were to prick my finger and get a little dollop of blood out of it and test it, it would tell me what my blood sugar is at this exact moment. So blood glucose, is that just blood sugar? It is the concentration of glucose in the bloodstream. And this fluctuates all throughout the day, depending on what we've done for nourishment, so what we've ate, what we've done for physical activity or movement, what we've done from a sleep standpoint, stress, and even what our insulin is doing. So insulin, I had mentioned, is a hormone that gets sugar from our bloodstream into cells, muscle, brain, liver, everywhere. And this can either be really effective or maybe not so effective, but depending on what's going on. Another really important hormone in the whole blood sugar pathway is glucagon. This is a hormone that even if we don't do anything, if I'm just sitting here but I haven't eaten for a while, or I get really stressed out, our body's gonna start to release glucagon, which will start to increase our blood sugar levels naturally. We store sugar and this thing called glycogen in our liver. It's just stored sugar and water. And so when that happens, this is our safety reserve. This is like our backup generator. And so if our blood sugar drops low, that's really dangerous for our body. So our body will then take glucagon, raise our blood sugar levels so we don't get dizzy, pass out, and all of the things that aren't great with low blood sugar. So we have a few different levels here. This line is for people without diabetes. Then we have the line for people with diabetes. And so fasting would be before meals. So typically when someone wakes up, we are going to look at, especially if you have pre-diabetes or diabetes, we're probably looking at what is your fasting blood sugar. So these are the range we want it to be in. Postprandial will be 1 to 2 hours after eating a meal. And these are the ranges that we would want it to be in there. Other things that are going to affect your blood sugar are stress, nutrition, sleep, and obviously physical activity. So I mentioned those things. So what does it mean from a nutrition perspective? As a dietitian, this is the thing that I do all day, every day. Eat, live, and breathe food. And the most important thing that people can know about blood sugar regulation is that eating regularly is the best thing you can do. So we need to eat regularly balanced meals. So that means 3 meals a day. We probably need to have a snack at some point. If you're really active, we need to be adding more in as well. And those meals ideally should be balanced. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, but with some sort of carbohydrate. So for example, that could be a piece of fruit or a potato or rice. We then want some sort of protein. This could be fish or chicken or tofu or eggs. We then want some sort of fat. Sometimes our meat will have a little bit of fat in it too. And then we want a fruit or a vegetable because that's going to be some fiber that's going to help slow down our digestive tract, which means it's going to slow down how quickly that glucose is absorbed into our body and our bloodstream. Exercise and movement is really helpful because when we have sugar in our bloodstream, it can get stored in our muscles and our liver as glycogen. Again, think of those backup generators. But outside of that, there's nowhere else for it to go. So the only way we really start to move that is either we just wait for a period of time or we can actually move our body. So even going for a 15-minute walk, even if it's 10 minutes, if you have 5 minutes, that's gonna be better than nothing. Some movement's gonna be better than no movement. And if you can do that around meals, if it's before or if it's after, that's great. That's gonna rapidly start to either make you more insulin sensitive if you do it before a meal or help utilize that blood sugar later if it's after a meal. Stress is gonna be another thing that's really gonna impact us. So when we're stressed out, our body and our nervous system are gonna know we need to fight, we need to fight, we need to flee. And there's gonna be certain hormones that are released in that whole process. So one of them is cortisol and adrenaline. There's a few others in that pathway too. And what those do is because when we need to fight or flee, we need energy. We need sugar for our muscles to do that. Granted, when we are sitting at our computer, we don't need that. And if we're just stressed by our emails, We don't need that sugar, but our body doesn't understand that. And so especially if this is a chronic pattern, if you're chronically stressed out, that means our blood sugar levels are chronically more elevated. And this is gonna actually impact our body's insulin sensitivity, meaning our body's like, oh, that's fine, this is normal. This is like the level that it's normally at, so we're good. Therefore, blood sugar is just higher and insulin's not doing its job. Then we have sleep. So any sort of sleep deprivation is going to make you more stressed out and your body more stressed out. What is sleep deprivation? That is less than 7 hours per night. Most people do not get that. Ideally, we want to get 7 to 9 hours per night. That would be the goal. That would be great. In Flagstaff, we have higher rates of sleep apnea because we live at really high elevation. So that's something, if you snore, if you wake up with headaches, if you wake up and feel like you aren't rested or just fall asleep anytime you sit down throughout the day, I suggest talking to your medical provider, maybe that's Vera or somewhere else, to really ask them and get curious about sleep patterns. Another thing, that if we're not sleeping enough, this is gonna decrease our insulin sensitivity, therefore blood sugar is gonna stay higher because we don't have that important hormone. And it's also gonna make us hungrier. And another thing that it's gonna do is it's not gonna tell us when to stop. Our bodies are just gonna be hungry. They're not gonna tell us when they're full, as opposed to if we had a really nice, long night of rest, and then our insulin is not gonna be functioning in the way that we want it to either. Other things like medications or being sick, anytime we're sick, that's also stressful to the body. And so we need more sugar in our bloodstream to help us fight off bacteria or viruses. Granted, we don't want that all the time. I used to work at the hospital and we would see people who were totally healthy, totally normal, had no history of high blood sugar, but if they had a huge car crash, they were coming out of surgery, if they, had some sort of trauma in their body or were really, really sick, had a bacterial infection, their blood sugars could have been really, really high. So we were trying to manage those even though they didn't have diabetes. Another thing is certain medications can cause high blood sugar as well. So if you've ever heard of like corticosteroids, those are really great. They're beneficial at times. Granted, they also raise blood sugar and they don't want to be likely a lifelong drug forever and ever. I'm not your doctor. So another thing, this is the way, because it's kind of like a blood sugar pathway. So we can think of this as when we eat food, our blood sugar rises. Our pancreas, this little yellow guy here, is going to release insulin. That's going to allow our cells and our liver, our muscle, our brain cells to absorb and fat cells to absorb that sugar for later. If we exercise, that's going to lower our blood sugar. Then what will happen is in this case, their blood sugar is low from either exercising or just not eating for a while. What will happen is our body will release this thing called glucagon. Again, the hormone that will naturally raise our blood sugar. We can think of things that are stored in our liver, again, with that backup generator aspect. And we have about, we have a pretty good amount of stored sugar in our liver. But what will happen is either if it's too low, so because we haven't eaten, or because we're stressed out, our blood sugar is naturally going to rise and the whole cycle will typically continue. Again, if this is more prevalent here, this is going to be problematic, and especially if we aren't doing any sort of release of that sugar through movement or exercise. Okay, so what are the long-term risks? So if you have elevated blood sugars, type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes, there's a higher risk of you developing heart disease. It's kind of a really complex pathway, but I'll explain it really quickly because we had someone else who had asked about this. So if we have too much sugar in our bloodstream, it's inflammatory. So think of like alarm systems, if we had sprinklers, everything's kind of going off there. So if we have our blood vessels, there's going to be a little bit of inflammation here. And then say we also have high cholesterol. So we have more fat or lipids in our, lipoproteins, lipids, think of that, in our bloodstream. Then what can happen is if there's a lot of inflammation, then this can start to coat the inside of our arteries. What will happen then is that we just have less room for blood to flow through that, and our arteries are going to be less flexible. So what that does is going to cause a buildup of plaque and a buildup of cholesterol in our arteries. makes them less flexible, increases blood pressure. And what this does, this is gonna increase our risk of a heart attack, because that's when blood vessels will get occluded, so meaning that they kind of start to close off. If for some reason these plaques break free because our blood pressure is so high and it's just shooting through there, that can increase our risk of a stroke, increase our risk of heart failure. Heart failure is where basically our heart's just tired. It's just not working well, it's tired. That can eventually happen from a place of, again, it's working too hard to get blood and nutrients to the rest of our body. And then we can also look at from other long-term risks, are you more likely to have nerve damage? Because again, if we have too much sugar in our bloodstream for a long period of time, that becomes inflammatory, that becomes toxic to our cells, specifically nerve cells. So if we have uncontrolled blood sugars over long periods, our nerves are going to start to die off, specifically in like our fingers, toes, and eyes, because these are really small blood vessels, and even in our kidneys. This will result in a loss of sensation in our hands or feet. So sometimes you can hear about diabetic ulcers, or things like that, where if you can't feel things and I'm walking around and I stub my toe, I may not know that it's actually hurt, because I may not feel it. And then if I don't know that wound, there's a wound there, that's gonna lead to it possibly, us not knowing about it, delaying wound care, all these different things. And then because blood actually brings nutrients in to heal wounds, there's gonna be less blood flow there, because, some of those, smaller blood vessels have started to die off or not be there anymore. So lots of things. Also, when it comes to kidneys, 1/3 of people with uncontrolled diabetes will go on to develop kidney disease, and that's because our kidneys are in the back, and they're also really, really tiny blood vessels in there, and they're really, really precious, and we need to take care of them. Great. So when we think about this, let's think about carbs. So when you think about carbohydrates, all roads lead to glucose. It just depends on how fast. So every single carbohydrate will eventually get broken down into glucose and eventually land in our bloodstream. So what is the function of carbs? It is quick energy. They basically tell us when we're full. They tell our brain to stop eating, because when we've had a little bit of a blood sugar rise, our brain's like, oh, great, I have what I need, so I'm gonna stop talking now, so I'm gonna stop screaming at you. What will happen is they will eventually get broken down into sugar. It will go to our bloodstream and then again get stored as glycogen in our liver and our muscles. When you think about it from a muscular standpoint, if someone's doing something for an extended period of time, our body really only has enough sugar to last for about 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours, depending on what's going on. And then at that point, we kind of just go into extreme shutdown mode. So we do need sugar for our body to function, especially if you are very active and moving. It is also going to help with muscle recovery, helps with hormone regulation, and again, telling us when we can stop eating. Granted, the thing with carbs is that they get digested really quickly, and then we're hungry again. So I will go through that in a moment. But when we need to think about eating carbohydrates, this is a very common thing for people with diabetes, that they think that they can never have them. And that is not true. We still need to have them, because we need some sugar in our bloodstream. It's helpful. So we do need to have them with every meal. We probably need to have them with most snacks. And when we look at how much, it's totally gonna depend. It's gonna depend on you, your activity levels, what your blood sugar levels are like, but typically it's about 1 to 3 handfuls per meal. For some of my athletes, I have them at a much higher range, but a handful is gonna look something like this. So you have your hand, it's a leveled out thing here, that's about a handful. And then if you're hungry for a snack, we probably need to eat some carbs as well. And they're gonna come from, I will send this out, but they're gonna come from any sort of bean or whole grain. So black beans, pinto beans, kidney beans, whole grains, quinoa, whole wheat, oats. We are then gonna get them, when they have fiber, from a starchy vegetable place, so potatoes, peas, corn, fruits, and then a lower fiber, which means it'll just get digested a lot quicker, is gonna be refined grains and sugar. That doesn't mean you can never have these, it just means we probably wanna add something else with it. So when you think about how we are looking at meals and meal structure, this is kind of an example of what happens in our blood sugar levels. So if we just have carbs, let's say this is maybe a 30-minute mark here, it's gonna go up and then it's gonna go down. So we have a high load of blood sugar there, and then we just end up crashing. So if you've eaten, say it's like 3 handfuls of crackers or a banana, and you're like, cool, I was great for 15 or 20 minutes and I'm hungry again. That's because it takes a lot of calories to actually digest food, surprisingly. And our blood sugar will drop again. If we can start to layer this in, say we have a banana and we have a little bit of peanut butter with it, that's gonna give us a little bit of protein. And we're gonna go to this like blue line where it has a little bit of fat as well. So you can see this nice curve where it's like, oh, maybe that would last you instead of just 30 minutes, maybe an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. Versus if we're thinking about a more complex meal that's maybe a little bit bigger, banana is kind of a good example for this too, because it has some fiber. But imagine if we have some carbs, say we have a sandwich, we have a few pieces of bread there. We have maybe, if it's a lunch sandwich, you have some deli meat or tuna or something like that. You have some mayo in there, and then you throw some extra like veggies or fruit on the side. Wow, look at that beautiful green curve. And at that point, we're full for like 3 or 4 hours. So combining foods is really helpful. You are gonna eat a higher sugar food and we're looking at blood sugar and thinking that that's a risk for you. Doesn't mean that you can never have a cookie. It doesn't mean you can never have these things. It's like, hey, let's have it with something else or in conjunction with a protein and maybe some sort of fiber. Okay, so the 5 keys to managing your blood sugar levels are increasing your fiber intakes. The more fiber you can do, the better. We look at every single diet that has ever been studied. The one thing that they have in common is it doesn't really matter which one. There's actually no one that's better than another. It's whichever one you like, whichever way you like eating. But when you look at, if you've heard of like the blue zones or things like that, or other cultures and ethnicities of how they eat, the healthiest ones are actually gonna have the most fiber in them. So fiber is gonna come from vegetables, whole grains, beans, and fruit. We'll also get it from some nuts and seeds as well. We also need to look at prioritizing protein. So if we go back to this slide here, say we wake up in the morning, and just ignore these lines for a second, say we wake up in the morning and we're like, right here, if we don't end up eating, or if we end up eating just something like a piece of toast in the morning, we're up and down. And we kind of start on this roller coaster and we're just going up and down all day. Granted, if we were to have something a little bit more balanced, like some eggs and some toast and some fruit, we have this, and it's like, oh, cool. Oh, now I'm hungry, instead of the alarm bells going off and being like, I'm hungry right now, and then you're screaming at your coworker, because that's not very nice. So we want to prioritize protein in meals and all throughout the day. So it's gonna come from lean meats, tofu, fish, eggs, dairy, beans, nuts, and seeds. We need to also look at eating enough. I think this is one thing that people are really scared of, especially if their blood sugar is high. It's like, well, I just won't eat because eating makes my blood sugar rise. I'm like, sure, that's fine. But then what's gonna happen is that fancy hormone called glucagon is gonna come and your blood sugar is gonna tank anyways. And then your body's gonna say, bring in all of the artillery here. And it's gonna naturally rise it anyway. So for us, it's better to just be in control of what's happening. So if we're starting to notice our blood sugar is going low, we can have banana, peanut butter, something like that. So it's that natural rise instead of our body basically taking over and it looking like this. Because there's nothing else to slow it down when we're doing it from the inside of our bodies. So we want to aim for balanced meals and snacks. Typically, I find people are normally okay between breakfast and lunch. It's that 6 to 7 to 8 hour period between lunch and dinner, depending on what time you're eating, where people get stressed, they get angry, they lose focus, and that's when the blood sugar gets a little wonky. So eat enough, eat frequently, probably about every 3 to 4 to 5 hours is a great place to be. We want to get moving. Exercise improves your overall insulin sensitivity. Again, another thing that we need to think about is if you love doing all the like wild Flagstaff things, great. If you are not an endurance athlete, that's also great too. You can easily walk 10 to 15 minutes before or after a meal. And if you walk before, that's going to improve your insulin sensitivity. If you walk after, that's going to help your body utilize some of that blood sugar. We can do walking, we can do strength training, we can bike, we can dance, we can play with our kids, we can do yoga. I don't care what you do. All I care is that you're moving your body in some way, shape, or form, and it's something that you like, so you keep doing it. So a lot of people, I own a gym, that does not mean you have to go to a gym. I don't care. You can do whatever you want. You can garden, you can do yard work, you can go chop wood, all of that matters. Another thing is we need to manage stress and sleep. So again, if we aren't sleeping 7 to 9 hours, that's going to start to impact, raise our blood sugar. It's going to decrease our insulin sensitivity. It's going to make us hungrier, and our body's not going to tell us when we're full. So that's really important. So true or false, you don't have to do true or false because it's already here. Natural sugars are not inherently better. So if you think about maple syrup or honey or agave versus white sugar, all of the ones I previously mentioned will have a few other nutrients in them, but all roads lead to glucose. So that's important to know. Sugar does not cause diabetes. Diabetes type 1 or type 2 is a very complex metabolic disease that happens over years and years. So if you just ate a lot of candy on Halloween, you're not just gonna have diabetes. It does not work that way. But again, if your blood sugar is constantly and chronically high, it's gonna put us at a higher risk because then things start to get a little funky in our body. Keto is not the key to blood sugar regulation. For some people, maybe. For other people, if you don't like it, if you hate it, if it doesn't align with you and your family's values, then no, you don't have to do that. You can eat carbohydrates, even if you have high blood sugars, if you have diabetes, we probably want you to do that so our body doesn't have to take over in all these other ways. So you don't have to go really extreme. Remember that consistency is key and intensity is probably not going to be the answer. So if you have questions, let me know. You can also email me here, and you can also see me for 6 free sessions a year if you are under a NAPET health and insurance plan. So you can scan that right there, and you can come and hang out with me, and we can come up with a personalized plan just for you that works for you based on your culture, your family, your time, and foods that you like. So thanks.
Any questions from the participants online?
Nothing?
Yeah, well, maybe, oh, here we go. Becky says, thank you for hosting this. You're welcome.
Thank you for coming, Becky.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, this will be, I will send the slides over. I'll send over a few supplementary things as well. And feel free to find me, hang out, reach out to me because I'm here as a resource.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here. I will go ahead and end the meeting. There's no further questions. Thank you.